Hi, Marilyn here, and I'm here with Saturday Sampler for July, and I'm going to talk about doing raw edge applique, which is part of our outside border if you would like to do that. So this is what it looks like, and this is this part of the applique, and you can see it on the quilt. I've done it on the bottom part and the top part of my quilt, and actually out on the outside corners. And it is a part of page 14, which shows the applique here. Right here you can see it up close in the colorway, and it's also the applique pieces are on page 14 and 15. 15 is not 14, 15, 15 and 16. And 15 is important because it shows you the 3 flowers, the center bouquet, the 2 outside bouquets. This one is the corner, and then this one is used on the sides of the bouquet. So you really have to pay attention to those because it has the numbers on them, and it refers to the pieces that you're using that are numbered also. The other important part is that it says that the files or the pieces that are here have been reversed or mirrored for fusible applique, meaning that you don't need to flip them upside down. So when you're doing fusible webbing, when you draw on it and then put it on fabric, once you turn it, it always turns upside down, meaning that when you have a regular picture, you need to flip it upside down, otherwise it turns out backwards if it's something that has a direction to it. So the nice thing about this is a few of these do have a direction, the leaves do, so we don't have to reverse them, and that makes things very easy. So in any case, just to get going, you're going to refer to, you don't really need to do any cutting here except for making the outside edges, which are right here, and you're going to just cut exactly like they tell you to do and piece it. And I have that piecing information also in the previous video for how they go together, but just remember that they you need to have 4 each all the way around. They're pieced exactly the same as the other cutting, and they fit exactly the same as the other pieces. Okay, so they also have you cutting the outside edges at the corners at 7 inches, but you will cut them down to 6.5 once you have this. Like this is 7 inches, but once you have it sewn, you'll cut it down to 6.5. They always, in applique, usually have you cutting things a little bit bigger, just because once you sew it, it gets a little, the edges maybe get a little out of shape, and then you'll cut it down to 6.5 inches just to get it sewn in. That's the same for the piece here. So like this edge will finish at 6.5. They have you cutting this at 7 inches, but they'll have you cut it down to 6.5 before you sew it in. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to get things too close to the edge. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is talk about our fusible. You need to have some kind of lightweight fusible web. We have Heat and Bond Light at the shop, or we have Sulky fusible web. When I'm doing sewing, I like the Sulky is ultra light and it's very nice, but the Heat and Bond will work well too. So either of those are a nice choice to use. So you need to get one of them. On one side, it's a nice paper edge, and the other side has like a pebbly side, and that's the fusible. You don't want to draw on the fusible. That's the part that's going to stick to the fabric. You want to draw on the paper side. So I've just drawn a few pieces just to show you how it's going to work. So first of all, the first thing that the pattern shows you is how many that you need for each item. So the one that I'm going to demo on is I just did this corner piece here, and so it shows you all the alphabet letters. So what I did is I drew out number D, which is part of the flower, and this says D here. So I find D on my applique pattern, and here it says number D. And if you're going to make the full powder, it tells you how many to do, and you need to make 12. Now I made half of this, so I counted how many I need to make, and then I corrected my powder, and then so a note to myself was that I only needed 8. So if you're going to make half of it, you might want to count and say, well, how many are in here and how many do I need to make? That's up to you. So you could do a self count and then see how many you want to do, or if you want to do the full thing. So once you do that, take the full pattern, you put your fusible over the top, and then do you know, a good pen or something that you can see, and you're going to, you know, draw or trace. I'm just going to draw something, but I could see over this, and then I would draw, you know, my pattern over it. Okay, and then once I draw it, I take the full thing and I draw a number of them, and I put a little thing in the corner of what this shape was, because once in a while you have a number of shapes that look similar, so you want to put what alphabet it or number or letter or whatever it is, so that you can identify what you've been drawing. Now, before I put this on fabric, you can see I have a little hole in here. Okay, and this is called window painting. And what this does is it cuts out the middle of my fusible so that when I have it on fabric, the hand of it isn't quite so stiff. It's cutting out some of the center of the fusible. I still need some fusible in the outside edges so that it sticks, but I don't have the whole thing fused. And I've done some of this on here. I can show you like what I've cut out. I mean, some of you can't cut out a lot just because the piece is rather small, and on the little circles I haven't cut out anything. Now, what do you cut it with? Well, I have a little blade, you know, that I use to cut, but it's easier if you keep the piece all on one instead of cutting it out little by little. That way I can hold it and cut the shape out. Well, here I'm not making it look that easy, but it's really not that hard, and you can cut the shape out. So I have that, or sometimes you can have a little Olfa blade, you know, that has a sharp edge, and you can cut some out. Or if I have bigger pieces, I take my little rotary cutter. Sometimes if some of you have a little smaller rotary cutter, and you can just cut it out. It can be a rough cut. It doesn't have to look pretty, just to get some of the center cut out. Now, when I'm doing an applique that has a lot of the same shape, like I'm doing something and it has 50 leaves, I might take and cut out a plastic piece of template of that shape and then trace with the plastic template, because then it's a lot smoother and it comes out a little more consistent. When I'm doing circles, I have this that I bought eons ago at a, well, you can see it's even cracked, at a office supply store in the design department, because I do a lot of applique, and it's much easier to draw a circle with this. Circles are very hard to draw, so I found here what size the circle was close to, and it was, you know, that shape, and then I could draw my circle. Now, I'm not saying you have to go out and buy that. You know, find something that's similar to this size, a dime or a quarter or a nickel, and that's easier to at least draw that shape than to try to draw a circle. Circles are difficult. It's hard enough to cut them out, so find something that makes it easier to draw a circle. Okay, so you get all of your shapes drawn, okay, and then you're ready to put them on the wrong side of your fabric. Now, the lovely thing about batik is there's really no wrong side. There's no bad side, so that's one advantage. But if you're doing non-batiks, make sure that you press them onto the wrong side of your fabric. So you're going to rough cut it. Don't cut it exactly, and press this onto the wrong sides of your fabric. So you see I figured it out, what color. So here it says D. So here's my D, and it says dark pink. So I've taken my D shape and put it on dark pink. I have my G shape, which is my leaf, and here's my G, and it says dark green, and my H, which is lime, and my little buds, which are somewhere on here, the rose color, and E, which is the center of the rose here, and then my little circle, which is the lime green. And those are all the pieces that I need for this shape. So it's telling you what color you need and which fabric to put it onto. So I lightly press these with a hot iron, and I've just pressed them down. It doesn't take a big press, just to press them on and get them adhered, okay? Once you have them pressed on, get a nice, good pair of sharp scissors and cut out your shape. And once you have that shape cut out, so I'll just take a pair of scissors here and just cut out, just to show you, I'll just cut out a shape. And you're going to cut out that shape. And once you have that shape cut out, I usually wouldn't use these big old scissors, but that's what I had handy here. Then this will separate. The paper will separate, and on this side is your fusible. And that's the size that you're going to put down here to fuse on. So I'm going to take and cut out all my shapes, which I've already done, and place them, and I'm going to have a picture of this sitting in front of me. So I actually had this picture sitting in front of me so that I could see it. It's a little bit small, but you can still see it. And I had this laying in front of me, and I looked at that picture and, you know, got it somewhat similar or how I liked it. And I sat that down, and I had this on my wool pressing mat, and I sat it in front of me and laid it out. But the first thing that I did before I did that is you want to put a little bit of spray starch or best press or whatever you had. So I took my starch and I sprayed my background, and I pressed it once just to give a little bit of body to your background before you start sewing it. So I sprayed this, pressed it, and then I pressed this in quarters so that I had a good mark here so that I knew where the center was. Okay, and then I laid this down, and then like how I had it, and once I had this set, then I pressed it in place. Once you press this in place, that's it. You can't lift it. It's pressed down. You won't be able to move it, so make sure that it's exactly where you want to have it. Then I flip it over and I press it into the back, and what that does is it draws the fusible up into the back of the fabric. So you really want to have it fused nicely before you're ready to sew. So now, once we have that all done, we're ready to sew it down. And we'll move it over to the machine, and I'm going to show you how to sew it. So we'll get ready to sew. Okay, so now I have my machine set up, and now we're ready to sew on this piece. I have my machine set up for a blanket stitch, but some of you may or may not have that stitch. So you could do a blanket stitch, or you could do a zigzag stitch, or you could do a decorative stitch. I do a very, very small stitch. The whole idea is that you want to lock your edge in so that you can wash it so that it doesn't fray or do anything. This is a temporary adhesive so that it will stay on for a short amount of time, but you definitely have to sew the edge down. So a blanket stitch looks like this. It's going to go in and then take a stitch and then go in like this and go in and like this, like this. The whole idea though is that you want to stay perpendicular to the edge of your piece. Now as it curves, you have to still stay perpendicular to your edge, meaning that if it's curving, you're going to have to lift your foot up at times so that it stays perpendicular. So the best ability to do that is to stop with your needle down. Okay, now I have a very, very, very small stitch length. I have a length of about 1.6 and a width of 1.8. I vary. Sometimes I have a width of 1.6. Now this is manipulated. When you first turn on your machine, your length and your width could be very wide and very long. So my stitch length and width are very small. That's so that I can really have a very small and clean and professional look. So it is very small, but it looks very clean, and it will also keep my piece from fraying. So now when I go around this edge, I have to really watch and keep track of where my my needle is going. Also, you have to have a applique foot, meaning that there's no bar right here, so that you can see where your needle is going, so that you can tell what's happening. If you have the regular foot on, you won't be able to tell what's happening. I also have matching thread. So here I have a green thread. I also used, in this piece, I used a bright pink Metler thread that we have in the shop, and I used a light pink. So this was, gosh, I'll have to look at what number is. We'll post what numbers they were. And I also am going to attach with the video a handout of exactly what I've been talking about here. So you'll have a written handout of the steps of the applique. Okay, so I'm going to be going. Now, if you were doing this for a show or entry, you would leave these threads out, and then you would take an opened sewing needle that you could put the top thread into, and then take that needle and sew it to the bottom and tie off through the back. If you want to be just easy about it, you could just basically hold your needle so that it just kind of holds and stitches over itself twice, and it locks it in place, and then you can sew. So this is pretty straightforward. I'm sewing forward. You can see that my stitch is pretty small. Now I'm starting to make a curve. Now I have a knee lift on my machine, so I'm going to lift my foot a little bit and move it, and then I'm going to watch the corner. Now I know that I'm getting to the edge, so I'm going to kind of slow it down. Now I have to make that curve. So now I know that my needle's on the outside edge, and I know that my next stitch is going to be in. So I'm watching it and go in, and now I can make that curve. So now I know I have to make a curve. I'm going to lift my foot a little, and then I'm going to keep going. And when I'm out, my needle is stopping out, is stopping at what I call stopping in the ditch. So this is my ditch right here. This is where I want my needle to always be on the outside edge of my applique, and I want it to be hitting on the inside edge. So that's why I like that open toe applique foot, so that I can see exactly where my stitch is going. And I can turn it a little bit. If you turn it too much, your thread might not be coming back over on top of itself, and it will be making a little bit of a V. So I want to be turning that foot so that when it comes back, it's coming over the top of itself. Otherwise, when it makes that V, it doesn't look that great. So I have to stop, and then I just lift the foot a little bit. Now I'm getting to this point where it has a little bit of a turn for that leaf. So I'm going to turn it. I'm going to make one stitch over, and then I'm going to turn it again. So how do I know how to do this? Well, I've practiced. So now I'm going to turn it a little bit more. And now it's a nice little straightaway. I can kind of speed up a little bit more. Okay. And then I can go again. So here I'm going down my leaf, and I'm trying to keep the outside stitch in the ditch. And now I'm going to turn it a little bit more. And then I can see that I'm going to be coming up to this point, so I'm really judging where I think I might hit that point. I think I have one more stitch to go. Okay. And then if I can, I'll make one in here. Okay, that turned out pretty good. And then I can make my way down the edge. Okay, so you get the point. So you can see, these would look pretty decent all the way down the edge, and then I would come all the way down here and then through and then all the way. And then when I get to the end here, I would just kind of double stitch over myself the end and then end that. Now here, when you have a curve like this down on this bud, you're going to be making 2 or 3 and then having you lift your foot, a couple, lift your foot. It's harder on the, not harder, but it's just a little more tedious on the curves because you're turning a lot. So you're having to lift your foot to turn so that you keep those stitches on top of yourself. And the same on these little buds here. When you get down to here, you're having to do a couple stitches, and then lift your foot, a couple stitches, lift your foot, couple stitches, lift your foot. So it just takes a little bit longer to do these, but you just slow down and make those turns here. So I'm just having to lift my foot as I make that turn. And the same with the circles. I make about 3 stitches, lift my foot to make sure that the foot is staying perpendicular to this piece all the way around. So you just have to be slow and steady, and then it turns out quite nice. So that's your raw edge applique, and it's really actually pretty easy once you do a practice. What I suggest is that you take a few pieces of a practice fabric with your batiks, scrap, put a few out on a practice piece, do a few practices of this, and then once you do for practices, I think that you'll find that it goes along pretty steadily for you. So there you go. Have fun, and we'll see you on the next time.